Going beyond the headlines. Asking the questions you want answered. Exploring government policies and how they impact you. We are delving deeper.
Good evening and welcome to Delving Deeper. I'm your host, Sono Lala. Joining us over the next few days are members of the National Advisory Committee on Constitutional Reform. We are joined with former House Speaker, Mr. Nizam Mohammed, and Economist, Dr. Terrance Farrell. Gentlemen, good evening and welcome to the show.
Thank you very much.
It's just to go back to Parliament in terms of watching Parliament, every time we hear about these joint select committees, and are there changes as it relates to the joint select committees, proposed changes that is from the committee?
We want more committees. We think, and this is one of the reasons why we talk about expanding the number of people in the Parliament and reducing the number who are government ministers, because you want Parliament to do that job. So we have recommended, for example, that the select committees should be expanded, that there should be more of them. There are, and Jackie Sampson-Miguel, who was on our committee, was the clerk of the House, and her estimate is that the Parliament actually has oversight over hundreds of institutions. We're talking about state enterprises, statutory bodies, statutory corporations, all of those agencies that are out there. And Parliament has responsibility to oversee all of those, but it doesn't have the resources and the time to be able to do that. And so therefore, to have that kind of scrutiny into that oversight, we want to expand the number of people who are in Parliament, to make them full-time, to pay them appropriately as parliamentarians so that they can do their job. We've also recommended, for example, that international treaties should come to Parliament. If the government and the executive usually goes and they would sign a treaty and they would ratify the treaty, and the treaty doesn't have to come to Parliament. The treaties very often don't come to Parliament. But the treaties should come to Parliament so that they could be looked at by a committee of Parliament who will scrutinize what our obligations are under these various international treaties, and Parliament can sign off on them.
Mr. Mohammed, a lot of these changes can only be made by a handful of people that are actually in the Parliament, and some of the proposed changes actually take away some of the powers that they actually have. How do we see this going, and do you think these people in Parliament, these elected officials in Parliament would be able to and would be willing to make these changes?
We are contending that the changes are absolutely necessary, and it is amazing that you've got hundreds of state institutions who are accountable to Parliament, and we hear nothing about how they function and whether or not there is sufficient oversight by Parliament itself. And as we have just heard from Dr. Farrell, there is a serious problem. Parliament simply does not have the manpower resources to carry out that oversight exercise to the satisfaction of the public.
And just to add to that, so we have made a recommendation that the Parliamentary Services Department, that is to say the civil servants, if you want to call them that, who service the parliamentarians, that needs to be beefed up and expanded, because the parliamentarians need to have that kind of support. They need to have support for research. They need to have support for when they're actually carrying out the committee business and so on from parliamentary staff. And so therefore that needs to also be beefed up as well. So we made a recommendation that the Parliamentary Services Department be independent of the Public Service Commission structure, and that Parliament can have responsibility for hiring its own staff, recruiting, hiring, disciplining its own staff and so on within the Parliament.
It must have been a couple of months ago, I went to a panel discussion at the Hyatt Regency, and there was a distinguished member of the panel, maybe you can ascertain who it was, but the person said that the Prime Minister, as head of the National Security Council, is held to account for a high crime rate, but he or she cannot fire or hire.
Correct.
I don't know if you can ascertain who it was, but is there any recommendations from the committee as to if the Prime Minister can get more powers in this regard?
But so what we say, Sunil, is that one of the things that we have tried to do in this country since the 1962 Constitution is to restrain the power of the Prime Minister. Right? Our report does not, in fact, do that. In fact, our report looks to remove some of the restraints that have been put on the power of the Prime Minister. Because the truth of the matter is that whoever it is made that remark, and I don't quite know the name of the person that you're talking about, but whoever it is made that remark is in fact quite correct. We put the executive in power to be able to carry out and to implement certain policies. In our view, it is entirely right for the Prime Minister to have a veto over the permanent secretaries, because the permanent secretaries work for the executive. And it is entirely right for the Prime Minister, all of the permanent secretaries are selected and put in place by the service commissions. We say that it is inappropriate for the Prime Minister to have a veto as to whether or not this permanent secretary should be working here or not. The Commissioner of Police, same thing. Because you can't hold the executive to account for crime, and the executive, i.e. the Prime Minister, has no power to decide who is going to be the Commissioner of Police and Deputy Commissioner of Police. It doesn't make any sense. And so therefore we have made a recommendation, particularly in that regard, that the Police Service Commission should go back to what it was. That is to say, it should go back to a situation where they are appointed by the President, in just like the other service commissions. And we say that the question of the appointment of the Commissioner of Police and Deputy Commissioner of Police should go back to the way it was, and that Parliament should have nothing to do with that, right? That it should be for the service commissions and the Prime Minister to deal with those things. Because we hold the executive to account for crime, for education, for service delivery, but then you can't do that, and you tell them you can't appoint this person, you can't remove that person. No, it doesn't make any sense. The question of appointment and removal of a Commissioner of Police is a very critically important in a democracy, because you do not want to have a situation where a Prime Minister is able to direct the police to do this or that or the other. They could have directed the police to arrest you and put you in jail, because police have that power. So for any situation like that where you have executive power, you've got to put something in place that checks that power, both in respect of appointment and in respect of removal, both. That institution is your Police Service Commission. So your Police Service Commission is appointed by the President, by a set of people who understand national security, understand the police service, understand something about those regulations and so on. There's a structure for identifying people who are the best candidates for being elevated to the top cop position, and the Police Service Commission would then carry out that function and make its recommendation. At that point in time, the Prime Minister should have, as before, a veto. So it is not the case that the Prime Minister is appointing the Commissioner of Police. That is not going to happen. But the Prime Minister must have a veto, just like with a permanent secretary. I have a veto. Why was it important for the Prime Minister to have a veto? The reason why is that the Prime Minister, as Chairman of the National Security Council, and being privy to a lot more information than most people would have, may have a view about the person who is put forward by the Police Service Commission, and may therefore be able to say to the Police Service Commission, I don't think that this person is the right person. So it's a veto. You go back to the Police Service Commission, the Police Service Commission go through their process, and they put forward a name. So it is not the case that the Prime Minister is appointing the Commissioner of Police. That should never happen. Equally, if, for example, a Commissioner of Police is appointed, and after a year, 2 years, 3 years, you realize that the person is not performing adequately or not as expected, then what should happen? Well, because the Prime Minister and the Executive are responsible for accountable to the people for the state of crime in the country, the Prime Minister can then say to the Police Service Commission, I don't think I have confidence in this police commissioner, and you might want to do something about that. And so the Police Service Commission will then evaluate the performance of the police commissioner and may decide then, at that point in time, we're going to change the police service, the commissioner of police. And they will put forward another candidate, right? And there's a process for removal. So you're keeping the Prime Minister away from both the process of appointment and the removal by interposing this independent service commission inside of there, which is supposed to do its job and so on. Now, one of the important things about the service commissions, Police Service Commission, Public Service Commission, Teaching Service Commission, all of them, the responsibility, for example, in relation to the DPP, is that you want them to come and say, these are my plans for dealing with X, Y, and Z. These are my performance metrics. This is how I'm going to deliver on these things. And that's what you are going to be held to account on. And we come to the point about accountability again. You are held to account on that. And if you are not delivering, it is not the case that that job is some kind of job that you have for life and that you could just not perform and no, that's not going to happen. That you're held to account by the Service Commission, and the Service Commission may recommend your removal from office.
What we have actually studiously avoided in Trinidad and Tobago is political interference in the police service. And that is why we have a Police Service Commission. But successive governments tinkered with the legislation, and they have made the legislation so cumbersome and so complicated that it is inoperable. And there can be no solution except a complete and a comprehensive overhaul. And in undertaking that exercise, what needs to be uppermost in our minds is the eradication and the removal of the political influence on the police service and the appointment of a commissioner.
Mr. Mohammed, what are the next steps in this constitutional reform process, and what can we, the people, expect?
We have submitted our report to the Prime Minister. The report is now in the public domain, and we have been asked by the government to stay on. Our job was to provide this report, which we have done, but we have been asked to stay on until the end of the year, and to engage the public in helping the public to understand what we have done. In other words, to publicize the contents of the report. And we are there to explain, we are there to assist, and we are making ourselves available in that regard. We are not tasked with the responsibility of writing in a revised or a new constitution for Trinidad and Tobago. We are just facilitators. We are facilitating the process. At the same time, we want to get the message out there that we can only succeed if we get the cooperation of the public and the involvement of the public. And I was heartened when, at the very outset of our discussions, Dr. Farrell said that the crime situation in the country is a constitutional issue. I wish we can get that message far and wide and let people and succeed in helping people to understand that if we are to restore law and order in Trinidad and Tobago, we've got to start with our constitution. It is not working properly as a result of our Constitution not working properly. We have a lack of accountability at every level in our society. We have a level of incompetence and non-performance that is driving our country to a halt, and we feel that the sense of hopelessness that is creeping in, we can put a stop to that by getting people to understand that we've got to do this together. And we are not interested in the politics, the partisan politics of the country. We are interested in harnessing the energies of our country towards a reviewed and a revised constitution for our country. We do not care about whoever they support in the politics. We are asking our people to leave their politics for a little while behind or away from this exercise, and let us have free and frank discussions as we are having and we have had in the past. And we feel that if we can succeed in getting the cooperation of the public in that regard, that we, on this occasion, the 5th attempt, we feel we can succeed.
The other thing that the committee has been tasked with doing is to prepare the way for the conference that is scheduled for the end of the year. The idea is that the report and the recommendations will discuss what we call the working document, which is actually section 5 of the report, will become the working document for the proposed conference. The proposed conference, we are going to be working on developing the ideas as to how that is going to, in fact, be constituted and how it's going to work and so on. But what's important, there are some sort of baseline things. It will involve large sections of the population being involved. And so some of the ideas that we have put into what is section 6 of the report on the proposed conference is that we want to use technology again, right? So that people who are in different parts of the country, you might be in Tobago, you might be in Arim, or you might be in San Fernando, that if, for example, the conference is being held, say, in Port of Spain, that you can connect all of those remote venues and that people can therefore go and sit in Arima or sit in San Fernando and in fact see what's going on and be able to participate. They might be able to signal their agreement and so on with various things that are put forward in the conference. So we're going to be working through some of those ideas over the course of the next couple of weeks and months, and then come up with a plan as to how that conference might be run.
Well, gentlemen, thank you very much for joining us. But before we go, Mr. Mohammed, I just want to get your final thoughts.
I believe I'm very optimistic about what we are doing. We have had some very, very good results so far. And I feel that if we are successful in connecting with the people and the people understand that this is a collective effort and it involves all of us, and if we are to do this, all of us have to come together to ensure that it is done in proper fashion. I feel that if we get the cooperation of the leadership of the country, and I am not merely referring to the political leadership, I'm talking about leadership in every aspect of our life. The church, the business sector, the trade union movement, wherever we are, I believe that people, leaders in the country, must help us to let the country understand that if we do not attend to this particular assignment properly and successfully, crime is not going to go away. This is going to be the beginning of a successful fight for restoration of law and order in our country. We want to talk to the young people of our country, and we want to convince our young people that crime is not the way to go. If we can follow the young people who are leaders at their level, and we can follow them and be encouraged to come together, there is a place for young people in the exercise, and there is also hope for young people in what we are doing. This is a non-political and apolitical. This has nothing to do with politics. It has to do with reorganizing our country in a way that it can be successfully governed. And if we do not participate, we are leaving it to the politicians who will take partisan positions that will not be of benefit to all the people. We want a sense of belongingness for each and every one, everybody across the board. And this is our big break that we are having. And I do not know what can I say more than what I am saying to convince the population out there that constitution reform is the foundation for reforming our society, reforming our public service, reforming our country at large, and providing for good and effective governance with accountability and happiness towards all.
Dr. Farrell, your closing remarks?
So I would just say two things. One is that I think at the start we talked about whether this was another exercise that was spinning top in mud. If it is, then I would be saying that the mud pit is getting wider and deeper. And so therefore, we can't allow it to happen. We can't allow it to happen. The second thing that I would say in closing is that there are many things in the document that we have produced. It's quite, I mean, it's almost 200 pages long. It's extensive. We think it's very comprehensive. But if there is one part of it that I think that I would like the average citizen to take out and to read and to think about, it is the revised preamble that we have put forward. Now the preamble comes before the sections of the Constitution. But what it does is that it articulates who we are as a people. It talks about our values. It talks about the things that we believe in. And we have rewritten the preamble to the Constitution, a draft new preamble to the Constitution that starts off with the words, "We the people." This is not new. It's not just the American Constitution that has that. Most constitutions that have preambles start off with those words, "We the people," because the people take ownership for what's inside of there. The people are taking ownership for their republic. The people are taking ownership for their society. And the preamble articulates those values which we think that Trinidad and Tobago population believe in. And I would just say, tell the people, take out those 2 pages and read them and think about them and see if you agree with what we have put down there.
Well, we've been trying this since 1974. Let's hope it's not another exercise in futility.
Right.
And as you said, we're not just spinning top in mud again.
Yeah.
Gentlemen, Dr. Farrell, Mr. Mohammed, thank you very much for joining us on this week's episode. It has been a very lengthy one, but I think the people probably understand a lot more about constitutional reform and this process going forward.
It has been a pleasure.
It has been a pleasure. Thank you very much, Sunil.
Join us at the same time next week for another episode of Delving Deeper. I am Sonulala. On behalf of the entire group, Have a great night.